Last orders. So we got the ultimate irony now. You've got two old farts talking about the future of systems thinking. So go on, off you go.
Well, you didn't know there was a beer called systems theory, did you? 9.4% proof from Belle Isle Brewery in Scotland. And there is actually a version of systems theory that has Stafford Beer's viable system model on the label. So I contacted Belle Isle Brewery. This is fantastic. You're going to make a real killing out of this. Try and find out why they were brewing systems theory beer. And of course, they've gone out of business. So I couldn't get any more. So I had to bring this stuff.
You didn't have to. You could have brought proper beer, you know.
Which is, has on it the logo of Hull Children's University. I've been working for Hull Children's University, with Hull Children's University for about 10 years. And the motto is to bring underprivileged kids. And the motto is aspiration, confidence, and engagement, or ACE. Now, why has it got a beer connected with it? Because one day on a trip round this local brewery in Hull, myself and a guy called Dave Shillito, held Shill's beer, decided it would be wonderful to order a lot of beer and sell it on behalf of Hull Children's University to make some money. Now, this seemed a brilliant idea after he'd had about 8 pints. When we took it to the trustees, the notion of linking alcoholic beer to disadvantaged children was not regarded as such a good notion.
Cider's a much better fit, isn't it, really?
We'd ordered 50 gallons. What were we going to do with it? Well, I've now got to drink 250 cans of this stuff in order to make sure that we get rid of that particular system's failure, as it were. All right, Patrick, you can do the future systems thinking.
So just to preface this, I was supposed to be doing a keynote, and then Mike came along and said, "Oh, I'd like to do a keynote. Tell you what, why don't we do a fireside chat on the future of systems together?" And then went, "Oh, can I have the keynote then?" So anyway, here we are doing this. I thought I'd start with how this looks, or how this has looked from a SIO perspective. So probably about 10 or a dozen years ago, we did a sort of futures modeling exercise on this. And we looked at it through various lenses, but one of them was a sort of standard-ish, new ideas adoption life cycle model. And chart it, and we've been using that to chart the progress of systems thinking as a way of, people picking it up. And this goes from a really, really sort of predictable path. So it starts with, if you can imagine a sort of, normal distribution. I'm going to try and do it from your end, which is not my end. So on this far your left, your left, you've got innovators, and they're people who are just really into any idea if it's cool. It doesn't have to be any use, it just has to be really cool. And when we first came into this, when this group started, it was overwhelmingly populated by people like that. They were just hooked on the ideas. And the previous chair of SIO said to me, "What you've got to realise, Patrick, is none of them have actually practiced. Hardly any of them have ever actually practiced this stuff." So from there, you then move on to your visionaries, who are people who actually want to change the world. And then if you get that bit right, it gets across the chasm to the early majority, who are people, this is people who get the new idea as a grudge purchase, really. They're only going to do it if they've got something that's broken, and you can give the evidence that this will actually fix the problem. So you've got to evidence it that it'll fix their sort of problem in their sort of organisation, because they are super, super risk averse. And the reason the chasm's there is because the people, the other side, they really don't want evidence, because they want to go first. You know, they're the world changers. So obviously they don't want to be following anybody else, right? So you can use this as a predictive model, and we have done, and you can chart the progress as it goes. So once you start getting into that early majority, which is like where you're getting the mass adoption, which of course is sort of what we want if we want to actually change the world, as opposed to just thinking we're changing the world, then certain things happen. So you have to get mass adoption, you have to be able to scale. And to scale, you have to simplify. So loads of people over today, and it's not new, but loads of people over today have said, you know, we've got to make this stuff more accessible. We have got to make this stuff more accessible. And we've got to some extent, commoditize it. And that means probably standardizing it. Now, the innovators loathe this. Absolutely loathe it. And I'm afraid I'm sort of one of them. I loathe it, but we still got to do it. One of the things that we've found through time is that the ideas are actually a lot more flexible and a lot more viable than the people in the community. So generally speaking, people don't move in their position where they like to be in this, but the ideas move on. Now, the risk, of course, as I see it, and I'd like your views on this, Mike, the big risk, I think, is that as we do that commoditization, that standardization, that simplification, that making it more accessible, yada, 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 the problem there is that you take out the juice, you denature it, you end up with something that's really accessible, but actually isn't going to do the job. And you can see that happening with various groups and various things that are going on. I borrowed a phrase off Mike Burrows, who can't be here because his little girl's really, really ill. So he was supposed to be doing a talk tomorrow, but he ain't because Florence is in intensive care. Yeah. So his phrase was the great model collider. So, you know, you can see this syndrome of people going, we'll take the easy bits of SSM, so we'll just do a rich picture. We'll take the easy bits of system dynamics, we'll just do a cause and loop. No, we won't do stocks and flows because that's hard. And we might do a bit of stakeholder. Just slap it all together and that'll kind of work, won't it? You know? But it doesn't. You know? I mean, it might persuade the people in the room, in the workshop, but it isn't butch enough to actually do things reliably to change the world situation. So I think the challenge for us is how do we do that? How do we simplify, make it more accessible, make it standard, you know, commoditized, I won't say standardized, but commoditized, when it is so rich, so diverse, and still not totally easy, hell of a lot easier than it used to be. I mean, when I first learnt VSM with someone that we know well, the hit rate of people who got it was 1 in 20. Yeah. Now it isn't like that anymore, and that's partly to do with us, and it's partly to do with the fact that the world's changed. So people get why you would need it. So it's probably more like 8 or 9 out of 10 now. But that's of the people who want to show up. It's not of all the people who got to go to this workshop, didn't really want to. And it's some of those people that we need to get to in the end. So that for me is, the dynamics of this are the dynamics of this. It is going to go that direction because it can't not. Because it's being pulled by the situation that we're in the world. So people are going to pull on this stuff and they are going to pull it in that direction towards mass adoption. It's how we do that well, not badly. Monsieur Jackson.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Yeah, I think we're on the same page with that.
Thank God for that. I thought you were going to come out with my favourite Mike Jackson quote from a conference, feedback at conferences. Well, it's got to be a load of total bollocks, isn't it? So I'll bank I think we're on the same page.
I think we're on the same page. It is a matter of, system thinking is an incredibly rich area of work, and I remain convinced that it's the best area, a transdiscipline for translating ideas into practical action. And you have to develop the ideas into practical action alongside one another in a mode of action research. And I'll come back to that later, I hope. But in terms of the simplification, it's a bit of a prequel to what Patrick said. You have to know what it is that's worthwhile in systems thinking, that is worth simplifying, and I agree absolutely, without distorting it. And it's not an easy job to simplify without distorting, but you have to know what's there and what's worthwhile. And I guess that's what I've been trying to do personally over longer than I dare think about, is to try and work out what's good in systems thinking and what's useful to people in the world who want to improve their organizations. One thing we've learned is that there's no such thing as in my view, there's no such thing as a general systems theory that's going to come to our aid. Nobody's found a general systems theory that is applicable to physical systems, biological systems, and social systems. There are some people, unfortunately, who still pursue that path, and they even convince some people that it might be possible. In my view, it's like waiting for Godot. It's not going to happen. There's never going to be a general systems theory. Not that these people haven't done useful work. They're like alchemists, if you like. They've been looking for the elixir of life or the solution to all problems through general systems laws. They haven't found that. They haven't found enlightenment or turned base metal into gold. But they have dug up some useful systems concepts which can be used coherently in different systems methodologies. So I think what we do have, and which has stood the test of time, of a variety of different systems methodologies, or approaches, if you like, which are by now pretty well researched. That's why I say they've stood the test of time. And researched in the terms that they've got some sort of theoretical background, so you can continue to learn about them. And also they've had good use in practice, and there's practical examples which people can turn to and have a look at and convince themselves that these things are helpful. I like to refer to the other systems methodologies, but I think the ones that are most well established, there are two which relate, if you like, to a more engineering perspective, things that derive from the Toyota experience, like the Vanguard method and systems engineering. I like to think of systems as a broad church, and these things have had success. They may not be successful in all contexts, but Toyota and Deming helped the Japanese economy to recover after the war. Systems engineering got a man on the moon. So there's that tradition of work which is ongoing. The system dynamics, clearly, which is ongoing, well researched, there's good background to it, been going around a long time. There's the viable system model. There's soft systems methodology. That was my background. I went to Lancaster in 1978-79 and learned soft systems methodology. I was talking to somebody earlier who got a grounding in system dynamics, and that's all they knew about. All I knew about was soft systems methodology, because that's all that was taught at Lancaster. And critical systems heuristics, I guess, and the various modifications of those types of approach. But I think we can say now they're a core set of methodologies which anybody in the systems tradition of work, hopes to work in systems thinking, can get to know about. And I'll come on how each of those might be developed and how systems as a whole might be developed through action research. But my last point on this is, why I'm confident about these particular methodologies is that they each reflect different ways of looking at the world. So obviously the systems engineering perspective, Vanguard remained pretty mechanistic, mechanical systems in their orientation. The system dynamics looks at interrelationships in the world. That's a particular way of looking at the world and what's important out there, a particular way of handling complexity. The viable system model has its roots in organismic thinking. Soft systems methodology in purposeful systems thinking, how are people thinking about the world, what's their views and attitudes and perspectives, and Weltanschauung, and critical systems heuristics, more about perhaps fairness. And I like the idea that we have in systems thinking 5 systemic perspectives that we can take on the world, which take us outside the normal way of thinking. This is the mindset stuff that a lot of people have been talking about, the ability to work with different mindsets. And we have 5 methodologies which correspond to those mindsets, which enable us to do things in the world differently. And if you can't understand the whole system, then it's good to have 5 partial truths, 5 systemic perspectives that allow you to see something of the truth because they work, and 5 types of systems methodology which have proven themselves to work in terms of improving organizations and other types of social system.
So obviously I disagree with you on the 5 types, but we won't go there because that'll be a bit of a sterile argument. But so you don't get to sit down yet. I'm about to ask you a question. Lightweight, I don't know. So one of the things you mentioned there, Mike, is the action research take on this. So I mean, I think there's 2 things, 2 questions I have on it really. One is possibly 3. One is one of the things that I think has been broken is good links between academia and practice.
Yeah.
How do we sort that? Is it actually important to do that, or should we just as practitioners going, right, we've got stuff, we develop it, whatever the academics do, they can follow behind the parade and, you know, do whatever they want to do in sort of codifying stuff. So to get a healthier relationship around that, what do we do and how important is it or not? The other is the anti-ossification thing. So yes, I mean, I'm absolutely with you on we've got stuff that works, but obviously it doesn't freeze in time. I mean, Luce and I developed patterns of strategy because there wasn't a good approach to doing strategy that was systemic. And there weren't any good approaches to doing strategy because the traditional approaches, the non-systemic ones, just fail all the time. As we go forward into interesting times, there will be other areas where we just don't have methodology yet. So, you know, that problem of let's not get too rooted in the stuff that has worked on problems that we've faced in the past, but let's not chuck it out. That, I think, is a bit of a dilemma. And the third one is what answers does that give us on the sort of commoditization? Because we can't just commoditize. I mean, even you know, the SIO competency framework has got 13 different things in the systems bit. That's 13. That's a lot for people to get their head around. And you know, we're coming from a place where traditionally most systems, academics and practitioners were one-trick ponies.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you did SSM.
Yeah.
You know, David Lane does system dynamics.
I should have made that point there. Yeah.
You know,
at least we've moved on from.
And we have moved on from that. Thank God. You know, the next generation. But I mean that's a hell of a demand, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why I reduced it to 5. I think, seriously, the action research thing is crucial, I think, and the link between research and practice. Now, I don't care whether research comes from academics who turn that into practice. I don't care if it's practitioners who are thinking and develop the academic theory and academics follow on afterwards. Reflecting upon the last conference I attended, the ISSS conference, and the presentations I've seen at this conference, I think it's the practitioners that are in the lead. And I think you would agree with that in terms of developing new ideas, because some of the traditional systems approaches in the hands of academics have indeed ossified. Yeah. So let's take an example of...
It's not, I mean, not always, is it? Well, but you know, too often.
Quite often. Yeah. The one example that worked really well when it was in full swing was Checkland's soft systems methodologies and action research program. And Checkland well, okay, he wasn't really, he was an academic, but also a practitioner, and he worked with practitioners, and of course there was ISCOL at Lancaster that was doing consultancy work. And if you trace the development of soft systems methodology, and many of you will have seen this in his books, you'll see the development in the methodology, and you can relate that to particular projects in which he was involved. So there was this development of this methodology in relation to the experiences he was having.
You can see the same thing with beer. If you read the canon, you know, you go, oh right, and that's when he twigged that, and that's when he, you know, and it moves on and on.
I think the exemplar with Checklin is because he had this notion of an FMA approach. So you've got a framework of ideas, which initially was systems engineering, and a methodology related to that, and practice. You try those ideas, they don't work. You change the methodology, and then you start thinking about the world differently. You know, the world doesn't correspond to this thing where you can easily define goals and optimize in relation to those goals. Now, as SSM developed, it became stuck within its, if you like, its interpretive, its hermeneutic, its phenomenological thing. And I don't think that's bad. That's normal science getting better and better at doing the things SSM does better. Now, I don't think, frankly, that the other, if I just stick to the 5 for the purposes of this analysis, I don't think the other 4 have done the same sort of thing. Systems engineering,
which I wouldn't count as systems thinking, but I'll leave that.
In the broad church
I'll
sense,
let you off today.
Systems engineering has started to question its methodology, but it hasn't significantly changed it.
But it also doesn't have a theory, does it? Really?
Well, not really, but it's clearly mechanistic.
Yeah.
So not a particular concern. The viable system model, now there's one I think that there's a lot of secondary work on the viable system model, but a lot of the academics who use the viable system, in their minds, it pretty much has ossified. In other words, the viable system model hasn't changed. That's why, to take a recent example, books like Mike Burrows are quite refreshing. Now, I don't know Mike, but I imagine he's a practitioner. But there's a lot of academic worth in that, in terms of the development of the viable system model. Nobody's developing SSM anymore, as far as I can see. That seems to have ossified. Critical Systems Heuristics, well, there's talk about making the language easier to use, but nobody's really questioning its framework of ideas that underpins it. I think it's the least critical of all systems approaches because it doesn't criticize its own foundations or its own assumptions. It's controversial.
There's no irony there, is there? No irony at all.
And system dynamics, there are good ideas there, but it's not really formulated in an FMA. It's not developed in an FMA way. There are people like David Lane that ask sensible questions. But it's not really developed in that sort of way that soft systems methodology has. So I have this vision of action research through which each of these methodologies and others which you may value develop through that process of being explicit about the framework of ideas which underpins them, the methodology that they're using, try it in practice, learn about the methodology, and enhance the thing continually. And for each of them, that's the way, in my view, that they can improve. The only problem there, Patrick, is that they must also see that their view of the world, their framework of ideas, their systemic perspective underlying their approach is partial. And their way of intervening in the world is only one possible way of intervening that might work in a particular context and not in another context. Therefore, they must come to see the value of the variety of different systems approaches, what they can offer, what they're good at, and what they're not so good at.
To be honest, I think that's more of an academic thing than a practitioner thing. Most practitioners who do more than one thing get that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a no-brainer, really. I mean, as in, you really actually do not have to think about it, you know.
No, that may well be true, but in terms of advancing the discipline, it's obviously going to be better if we learn more about the ideas behind the methodologies, the methodology improves, and that we learn, therefore, the practice becomes more sophisticated. or the other way around.
Still leaves us with the how do we simplify without losing the value? So, I mean, I think what you're saying, to which I sort of agree, I think, is that in that process, you do get a synthesis of it, which is the essence of this thing is this. That's what we need to hang on to. And actually, we can change this around the edges, but the core of it is this. And that's actually in some ways, the framework of thinking.
Yeah, I'm describing what I see systems thinking has to offer at this point in time, and suggesting that we need more intense attempts to develop through the FMA framework, clear about the ideas we're taking, clear about the methodology, using them in practice, improving each of them and seeing what each of them is good at, finding new ones if that's the way it goes, and also, we're not going to be good at all of them, but awareness at least of the others, the essence of the others.
I mean, I was quite struck by David and Zaid's talk earlier, and for me, I was running parallels in my mind with what we do in patterns of strategy, which is a much more dynamic look about what happens when systems come into contact with one another in a sense. And it's not like system dynamics, but there's a kind of an essence match there that is but methodologically totally different. So I think there's some interesting things to get at there. So, I mean, I would disagree with your 5 what's its thing. The way I look at it is 3 types of complexity that we're dealing with, and they kind of fit to that. But that aside, I mean, I don't want to get into that. I do want to get into that argument. We're not going to do it. Not in this session. Different pub session. That aside, I think the thing we are agreeing on, we have got to do something that gets to the essence of these things that allows us to do that. Should we do some questions?
David's stuff is absolutely the philosophy underlying the whole thing, and I would agree it has to be a process philosophy, and I'm interested in the way that you've developed that.
One over there. It's nearly working, isn't it?
It might be.
There you go.
Excuse my ignorance, which 3 things are you comparing the 5 things against? So you're dismissing, that's a bit of a generalisation, Mike's 5 perspectives and saying that you like to use 3. Which 3?
Perceptual, dynamic, and structural.
Okay, thank you.
So if you map that as a sort of 3-dimensional space, you can map the different methodology. Most of the methodologies really major on one. So SSM and CSH are primarily about perceptual complexity. SD is obviously about dynamic complexity. VSM is mostly about structural complexity. Some of them bridge gaps, but they're all very, very differently aligned. And they actually deal with different sorts of stuff in a way.
My model is very similar, but I look at more types of complexity, if you like. I think it's worth separating more types of complexity out, because the methodologies clearly correspond to more than...
He's wrong, but we won't go there now. So. Ed? No. Yes, Ed.
Okay. John, yeah. I think maybe why we have a problem selling systems thinking.
This is way less fractious than I thought it was going to be. You know?
Yes, but this is way more diplomatic than I And there's something. So if I can just use it, the Constitution, systems of governing, and it would be easy to write a functioning, viable constitution for the UK. I mean, it might take more than a day, but it's actually not that difficult, right? And that's not a sort of cry of arrogance. It's a cry of, well, look, it's quite simple. The challenge that I have time and time again is persuading people, well, first of all, you know, what is the Constitution? and why does it matter? And unlike, as I said this before, unlike the other C word where people get terribly excited, this C word, people go to sleep. And trying to get across what it does and why it matters is, I think, the biggest task, I'm in this independent constitutionalist UK thing, that we face. It's sort of selling it, conveying it, and all the rest of it. And I suspect that this is the problem we've got with systems education and systems theory. That it's like, could we have some clarity about what it is? And I think please do carry on arguing in the pub, not in public, right? Here, if we could have some coherence.
We're assuming we're amongst friends here, so we're allowed to.
Well,
argue,
you sort of are, but you're sort of, 5 of these, 3 of those. I mean, I'm supposed to know what this stuff is, and I'm confused, So I think that the emphasis needs to come on, because, I mean, the viable systems model, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but, I mean, it seems to me to be a pretty damn good model. I mean, it's a bit like saying, Einstein hasn't been general theory of relativity hasn't been updated lately, so, it must be wrong, mustn't it? No, actually, I'm not sure that it is, and I know I've worked with viable systems dynamics, I know is very, very helpful. Systems methodology, I've worked with that stuff, I know it's very helpful. Critical Systems Heuristics, I'm not so sure. What was the 5th one?
Well, it was on systems on engineering.
Well, obviously, in the engineering field, it got us to the moon. So, and it's extensively used. So, it's not something, for me anyway, it's not so, I think the theories are pretty damn good. I mean, I'm sure at the margin, at the edge, things can be done. I think where the work needs to go in is, if you like, presenting it in a way that people can understand what it is. What is physics? I think if you asked a physics professor, you'd get hopefully a fairly good, what is systems thinking? We get an argument. So I think, first of all...
It is far less fractious a space than it used to be, Ed. So we have made progress.
I'm well aware of that. I mean, it was like Trotskyists in the 60s and 70s, wasn't it? The People's Republic of Judea or whatever it was. And
you're talking about the Judean People's Republic, not the People's Republic of Judea, right? You know that, right?
But I think in terms of cohering and arguments at the margin, fine. Coherent, but then how do we present and publicise? So when if I could just be abusive for one last second, twat from Oxford University says, oh yeah, that's systems thinking, it doesn't really work, does it? There's a very clear response.
I mean, just to come back to you on the Constitution thing, a big difference is that you can't push Constitution, but we're not pushing, we're being pulled. So the rise in interest in systems thinking is not because we've been fantastic at the messaging, it's because the situation, the world we're in is demanding it. So we are actually being pulled in this direction. I mean, yes, we have been pushing, obviously, but I'm not stupid enough to believe that, the move has happened because we've been pushing. I think we've just about done enough to enable it not to fall over yet. What worries me is that it will fall over if we don't get it right for the next step, because the next step is a bloody big one. Yeah.
I fully agree that how we think about systems will evolve. And the question I have is, how will AI, because it was a subject of several sessions today, how will AI help us in how our thinking about systems will evolve? What's your perspective on that? Because that's the future of system thinking.
Well, it's clearly an enabling technology which will change the way that people think about systems thinking. But at the moment, it needs to be used in a supportive capacity for helping to make the changes that systems thinking can hopefully establish a worthwhile. For example, in the National Health Service, it shouldn't become the core belief that AI is going to solve all the problems. There's a lot of work to be done. It has to be made more efficient, efficacious. It has to be made structurally better. There has to be more mutual understanding about what it's about. It mustn't exclude people. You have to look at the interrelationships with education and housing and all the rest of it. All things that the different systems approaches address. And that AI can be an enabling technology in each of those areas.
I think the huge potential with it, Jan, but there's also huge risks. So Gav there developed an AI version of the grammar. So it's got all the laws and principles in it. And you throw it a problem and it'll go, well, dub, 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 dub. You know, this principle and that, blah, 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 and this is what it says. And that's great. Sometimes you go, wow, you know. And then I did one the other day and it came out with a total bastardization of positive feedback. So it went to the colloquial thing of, that's nice feedback. No, it isn't, you know. I mean, it's a technical thing. That's what's been programmed into it, and it still manages to mess it up. So it's problematic, and I think where I disagree with you on that, Mike, is yes, you're absolutely right. That's that's how it should be, but it doesn't have to be. So it could just be AI becomes a substitute for people thinking about it, and what we get is what the AI allows us to think effectively.
In that aspect of it, I agree with you, yeah.
And that is, I mean, that's super risky on steroids, you know? So, I mean, systems thinking is called systems thinking. If you say, actually, we'll outsource the thinking to some idiot robot, where does that leave us? The answer is not doing any thinking, you know. So.
But if I may just add one thought, there is a big difference between using AI for efficiency optimizations as being supportive and using AI as a way to solve coordination problems between different stakeholders, between different parties. And in that last domain, AI will generate new systems theories because they will discover different types of patterns of collaboration and patterns of systems. So that's my opinion. It won't be supportive, it will be directive.
Well, I look forward to it discovering new types of systems thinking. I've not the same faith as you in that.
I've got the microphone, but I'm not sure I've formulated my question.
Well, we haven't fully formulated the answer.
I've got a lot of popcorn going off in my brain at the moment with all the different thinking. But I mean, I think on the AI theme, I'm in the area of kind of learning and work design, and I think AI is going to massively transform work design and how we get work done. And so that pull on systems thinking, I think, in the complexity that people are facing will only get stronger. And this might be a really simplistic analogy, but in my mind at the moment, I kind of think most of us can probably drive, but we don't all understand what's under the bonnet of the car and how that is. And I think probably there'll be people who will need mechanics, but there's a difference in what you need to know to be able to learn to drive and to be able to navigate and get to where you want to. So when I'm thinking of working with clients in business, I think I don't need to teach them everything that's under the bonnet. Maybe I don't need to know everything that's under the bonnet, but I need to be able to teach people how to drive and how to be able to navigate in a dynamic, complex world. And so I think, to me, that's a differentiation in expertise. So when you talk about taking it to the masses, as you were, and the mass adoption, I think if we're trying to turn everybody into mechanics, that's a massive challenge. Whereas I think if we're trying to teach people how to drive, maybe that's a little bit different. So that might be a bit simplistic, but that's kind of how I'm seeing it.
just to respond.
That's why you got the round of applause, not us. You see. That's how it works.
It depends whether you're in a self-driving car or whether you're in a car where your agency is. If we give up our agency in relation to AI, then we're sunk. And so the question is, how do we maintain our agency, and what form does that agency take into the future, and who are the people who are going to be capable of exerting that agency in the face of AI, I think. That wasn't my question. I wanted to respond to the dialogue up here about push-pull. I disagree a bit with the framing you've had, and I would claim that we have got to become more sophisticated in our design turn of our actions, and we've got to, and I'm going to say this to Mark but in another way, is create what I call demand pull institutions. The apprenticeship, all these nice apprentices here in this room, are here in response to a particular demand pull institutional innovation. If that innovation hadn't happened, they wouldn't be here. And if we hadn't capitalised on it, it wouldn't be here. And it seeded other things. But it is, in a way, a push, in a sense, a push to be smarter about how we foster innovation and how we foster demand for systems thinking in practice.
Well, that's not a disagreement, Ray.
They don't all have to disagree with us.
Can I?
No, apparently you can't, Simon. You could try, but...
Is that working? Yeah, it's working now. Can I call time in this pub? Because we're getting to the end here. I just want to put something else on the table. It kind of links to what Ray was talking about too. I asked the question, do we have a branding problem? And I'm not suggesting that we go off and invent Welsh words for everything that we all currently use, right? Like some do.
You didn't invent the word.
Like some do.
There is a television programme called that.
But do we have a branding problem? You know, is there something we could do which is quite simple in terms of marketing ourselves and our capabilities and what we're actually achieving? And do we even need to address the word system thinking as well? Because people say, oh, it's just thinking, isn't it? It's not actually doing. Oh, it's systems. It's all those technical things. Is that a brand issue that we face? Anyway, over to you.
I don't think so. I've been in the game a long time, and that does seem, the demand for systems thinking seems higher than I've ever known it. And you see that from international organisations, you see it from government. The systems thinking interest group in government is now over 1,000 strong. Okay, it's not huge compared to the 500,000 civil servants we heard about this morning, but that's grown pretty rapidly. Local government, there's been a number of speakers here who talked about local government, less so perhaps in business, but I think and certainly third sector organisations are keen on systems thinking. So I think the demand is there. The problem is on providing good quality supply. And that's why the potential loss of the apprenticeship is a disaster, and we have to think of alternatives.
But don't forget, that's only UK. I mean, this is, we're talking internationally. That's only a UK
but I like
story,
to think that the UK is the leading...
Yeah, you would like to think that, because you're UK, but I'd expect you going Yorkshire, actually.
Yeah. So...
you were thinking about that then, weren't you? Whether you could actually claim that.
Claim what?
Yorkshire?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I claim that against the inventor of Welsh words, that Yorkshire has probably had better poets than the Welsh. And the beer is certainly better.
Oh yeah, that's definitely.
The cricket is better. Yeah. The rugby league is better. Yeah, you're probably right, Patrick.
Should we call time?
Close it there and just say a round of applause.